of the programme. This is the Roundtable between the 5+5 dialogue and the post-COVID-19 context. The prospect for support and reinforcing cooperation in the Western Mediterranean. So I'm going to give the floor to the speakers who are sitting here on my right. Firstly, Mr. Daniel Schlosser, who's a councillor to the Interministerial Delegate to the Mediterranean, a Minister of Europe and Foreign Affairs in French government. Then we'll hear from Mr. Noor Eddin Benfrida, who's the Director of Cooperation with the European Union and European institutions in the Foreign Ministry in Algeria, who is connected online. Then it's Ana Elena Marquez, who's the Director of Middle East Maghreb in the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Portugal. And finally, Madame Fatna Ranishagli, who's a very active and efficient ambassador of Tunisia to Madrid. Each speaker will have 10 minutes to discuss the issues that they consider of interest. And then we'll hear the reactions from Mohamed Loulici, who's an ambassador from Morocco and a senior fellow of the Policy Centre for the New South, and Mr. John O'Rourke, ambassador and previous head of the delegation to the European Union in Algeria. And then we'll have a debate with other speakers on the subjects that came up. So Daniel, you have 10 minutes. I don't know if you want to stay there or you want to come up to... Okay, great. Thank you, Javier. It's great to see you again. I know that we always find a Mediterranean friend with you, so Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I'm going to stick to the theme of the conference, but I'd like to start by saying that I have a deep feeling, and I'm not just saying this as an ambassador, but that we've made a mistake. That we've missed a number of opportunities during this crisis. Crises are frightening, but also exalting, because we know that something is ending. There's no doubt about that. But we don't know what it's going to be replaced by. So at this pivotal moment of uncertainty, and it's a very sensitive time, because we really need to think before we act, and we also need to act in a determined, urgent way. Now, we need to master our future, and that requires refounding our relationships. Now, the relationships between societies and also between states. And that's what we're discussing today. Now, I think we all agree that for the first time in history with COVID-19, a worldwide phenomenon has affected all of us and just overtaken us. We know that we're coming out of this crisis, but it's been an unprecedented crisis. It should have brought us together and it should have been a double raising of awareness. On the one hand, our limits, individually and collectively. Secondly, and this is where we really failed, that is the supreme value of solidarity, which is the only rampart against the harmful effect of crises. On both sides of the Mediterranean, we have the same limits, we have the same challenges, and we're prey to the same needs. And the pandemic should have brought all of us to this double awareness that I mentioned. The crisis will leave dark, deep traces in the world. These scars will remain in the economy, public finance, health, social life, employment. And I think we need to learn from this pandemic quickly. And we have to think what solidarity we could have had, what we could have been enriched by. We should think about the links that we could have reinforced. And what we could have learned, how we can create a new social fabric. Now, crises don't create an irreversible state. Now, we can't go back, things have changed, but resilience, in fact, is the ability to return to the starting phase. And that's where we're making a mistake, because we talk about resilience, but we have this image in mind, coming back to what was there before. Now, we all have the same aspirations, and you know, the idea of something that, like the small tree that can bend in the wind and come back to its original state. Now, when we talk about growth and purchasing power and production of energy, we're saying, look, bring us back to what we had before. This is what the people are asking of politicians, to bend back like the tree. But if a crisis doesn't create an irreversible state, we need a different type of resilience, something that isn't static. We need a resilience which isn't just about thinking about healing the scars of the pandemic, and that limits the harmful effects on development. Now, the interministerial delegation to the Mediterranean, we have Ambassador Morel, who wasn't able to come, and sends her warm greetings. Now, in 2019, in Marseille, we organised, with the 5+5 countries, but also with the UFM, for the European Union, BUI, and with civil society of the 10 countries of 5+5 and youth, we organised the summit. You were there, Javier? And you did an excellent job. And this summit led to 5 commitments. It was signed by the foreign affairs ministers, and it was called a commitment to a new Mediterranean ambition, which aims to implement 30 projects proposed by civil society, and more generally, to collectively respond to the common challenges in the Mediterranean. Now, this included 2 projects that I'm going to talk about, and we were discussing this over lunch. That is a festival for ancient Mediterranean theatre, and also a Mediterranean network between north and south for training in relation to the sea. The sea has got 3 trillion in turnover. If you take all maritime economic activities, it's more than the GDP of most countries, 3 trillion. And so there's training in relation to the sea. And then there were 28 others, I just mentioned 2. Now, the foreign affairs ministers committed to supporting them. We have to remember that. The President of the Republic asked that in 2020, because the first one was in 2019 in Marseille, and then in 2020, before the pandemic, well, we didn't know about the pandemic, we decided to organize it for 2020, the second summit. It couldn't take place in June 2020 because of the pandemic. And we were thinking that let's do later what we couldn't do before. The crisis is not that harmful. So nowadays we realize that we can't do things as we did before. And the President started organising for February, 13th February. Not version 2, but the Forum of the Mediterranean World. And it would be, we finished with the 5+5. 5+5 is very important, because without the 5+5, there wouldn't have been the summit of the two coasts. Now, even if a certain number of countries are in the 5+5, we can say that the 10 of us, we tend to work together. We know how to work together. Over these years, 25 years, or 26 years, we've been able to overcome difficulties, and we've remained intelligently united on a number of issues. And between ministers, defence ministers, to meet together and to make decisions and to put them into practice. And the education ministers, if you can actually bring them here, I'm saying let's bring them together, we're able to work together. Now, thanks to the 5+5, that was the first summit, and thanks to the 5+5, we can say, welcome to all the others. We call on all the Mediterranean, and the Forum of Mediterranean members was open to all the Mediterranean, but above all, it will be organised with civil society and with young people around the Mediterranean. We'd like to give everyone the opportunity to listen to young people, to dialogue with young people around the Mediterranean, listen to what they're saying, what they expect from their future, to understand what kind of future they want. We have to listen to them and present their projects. Their projects will be represented. There'll probably be about 100 of them in and it will give rise to roundtables, discussions, workshops, panels, and so on. And in 5 areas: training, environment and greening of the blue economy, inclusion, issue of gender inequality, and innovation and digital economy, and culture and heritage. Now, the mission that was given to Karine Menel, who is the interministerial delegate for the Mediterranean, is to encourage a Mediterranean based on projects, a positive Mediterranean, a Mediterranean with solutions that is built through dialogue with young people and civil society, or through ideas, initiatives, products, and exchanging good practices. So I'll come back to my first point, and I've come to my conclusion now. I hope I won't go beyond 10 minutes. This is another type of resilience. It's not static, the one that comes back to its initial state. It's a dynamic resilience. That's what we want to create together. It's about a rebound that's based on our shared values. That remains our values around the Mediterranean that we share. That's the fixed point. But it's a rebound to push forward, to build together through dialogue, to design things through dialogue, to create a green economy and exchanging good practices between North and South. We need to learn from each other and on an equal footing. And we need short cycles and Mediterranean value chains. We depend on long value chains, and that really made us fragile. But using Mediterranean value chains, that creates a positive feedback loop, and we can build together, create skills, create a professional future, and create a common shared economy, and to develop a sharing of a common cultural heritage and common cultural foundations. So this dynamic resilience is the only one that is really adapted to the quality of the crisis that we're going through. And this creating resilience can only be built on links. Existing links that can be reinforced and new links that we can develop with a view to creating new original things to replace what the crisis has destroyed and made disappear. And this dynamic, creative resilience will be created through young people. For the MedThink, and this is really my last point, this demonstration I've made, what will it lead to? What specific proposals? Well, to reinforce our links through dialogue, because we're a solid historical nucleus that we can build things around. We need to strengthen these links within the 5+5 dialogue by encouraging ministers. The pandemic hasn't helped, but we need to think towards the future. Now, the 5+5 hasn't taken place a long time. Education really needs to be reinforced. I think the defence 5+5 is the one that's met the most often. We need to work on civil society. So, safety for citizens. So, we need to work together on citizens' security. We need to have real solidarity, mutual help in the area of fighting against natural disasters. Climate change is going to bring other challenges as well. Another proposition is to reinforce the very successful actions in terms of exchange and dialogue of the UFM, the Mediterranean dialogue with civil society, companies, politicians. That's what the UFM does excellently, and this needs to continue. It needs to be reinforced and developed. There are no journalists here, are there? Now let's imagine strong gestures within the Foreign Affairs Office that can bring out the Mediterraneans more strongly. I wouldn't say the Secretary of State for the Mediterranean, but something of that nature. The pandemic is allowing us to replace what was with something better. And the climate crisis, the definition of crisis I gave at the beginning really adapts well here. Not many things disappear irremediably, but some things do, like biodiversity. It's time to really reinforce this dynamic resilience. And those who doubt the ability of the Mediterranean to face up to these crises, especially its political crises, well, here's a word from Saint-Exupéry. If you want men to understand each other, give them something to build together. And I propose that we build dynamic resilience together. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Daniele, for that lesson on resilience. I think that will give us food for thought. Now, Noureddin, can you hear us? I think you're there on the other side of the Mediterranean. Noureddin. There we are. Good afternoon, Noureddin. Can you hear us? I can hear you very well. I listened to what the last Mr. Verden. Could we put up the volume a little bit, please? Could you speak? Yes, I can hear you very well. Can you hear me okay? Yes, that's fine. You have the floor. You have 10 minutes to speak. Okay, very good. Yes, I listened to what Daniel said. I share many of the things you said. First of all, allow me to thank the organisers of this event, and I'd also like to greet all of the participants. First of all, I'd like to express all of the interest that Algeria has in the work of MedThink. Within its co-presidency of the 5+5 dialogue, Algeria, has hosted the third MedThink meeting in 2018. It's also a chance to reaffirm that this forum is an excellent framework to reinforce complementarities, propose specific solutions and operational solutions to various different Mediterranean issues of common interest, especially those relating to the 5+5 dialogue. Algeria is particularly interested in the 5+5 dialogue. It's a good place for exchange, and it shows the richness and of the Western Mediterranean and the specificity of the Western Mediterranean. Historians and politicians have reaffirmed this specificity of the region. Now, the theme of the forum is prospects for 5+5 dialogue in the context of COVID-19. So what are the post-COVID-19 prospects? So what can we expect in the future? I think the prospects for 5+5 dialogue are based, first of all, on the principles of dialogue in 5+5, and can even be better adapted after COVID. So joint adaptation after COVID, I don't think it should move us away from the basic principles of the dialogue. So respecting the founding principles, which I'd like to remind you aims to bring together the work of partners in order to make the Western Mediterranean a real space of peace, stability, and prosperity. These principles were enshrined in the Tunis Declaration and also enshrined in other dialogue mechanisms. There are dialogue initiatives that have been developed in the Mediterranean as well. I'd also like to stress the importance of Dialogue 5+5 and its importance for cooperation. This factor has been reaffirmed, and it will continue to be in COVID-19 in favor of including new themes which are dictated by the situations of the various different regions, and also dictated by an increase in ambition seen in the Mediterranean initiatives, especially in the 5+5 dialogue. We'll need to reinforce the dialogue to reach agreement on difficult issues of common interest, and there are a lot of them, such as development, security, immigration, fight against radicalization, young people, water, Daniel mentioned a few of them, and I agree on this. Also, it's very important through negotiation to find peaceful solutions based on international principles. the non-intervention in sovereign states and respecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty of states in crisis. This should constantly drive our dialogue. This should guide our efforts. And also try to have a quick return to peace and stability in the region. So I must say that the dialogue 5+5 has a homogeneous, coherent quality to it, and so it's been called on to play a greater role in the future. Above all, in the shape that it needs to give over the coming years to regional cooperation, despite the difficulties that we know so well. So 5+5, as a form of exchange of experiences and goals, brings the northern and southern shores together. And by including civil society, especially universities, which I think should play a very important role here. They need to create a partnership, synergy, cooperation between the universities, between the north and the south. We need to have a soft mobility between universities. And we should try to create a holistic view towards long-term cooperation. And I agree with what Daniel said about the core vision. We need more dialogue, firstly, to bring together our views of the future, and also to develop new approaches. In order to develop the cooperation between the two Mediterranean shores of the Western Mediterranean. Political dialogue between Mediterranean countries is based on a global, indivisible view of security, where there's a direct link between political stability and socio-economic balance, and the relationship between security in Europe and that of the Mediterranean. Now, the 5+5 dialogue should complement other partnerships and dialogue initiatives with the various Mediterranean partners. For example, the Declaration of Barcelona, which has always been particularly valuable. So what we've seen in recent years in the Mediterranean, this shows the relevance and feasibility of a holistic approach on the issues of cooperation. I would also like to stress the importance of cooperation in fighting against terrorism and radicalization, against xenophobia and racism, against these problems, and we need to reinforce our cooperation in this area through an exchange of experiences for preventing radicalization, fighting against violent extremism and terrorism. Regarding economic cooperation, I'd like to focus on the increased cooperation of both shores in social and economic development cooperation. The dialogue 5+5 should be further used for this socio-economic cooperation. I should also include sections on the environment. Now, regarding COVID-19, we need a new chapter in these dialogues to talk about health. We talk about COVID-19, but we need general, regional and local cooperation in the areas of health. And I think there's a huge lack in the 5+5 dialogue when it comes to dialogue and cooperation and exchanges in the area of public health. So these failures, this lack that we've seen so far in the area of public health cooperation has been seen in COVID-19. And that's because we need more. We need a new approach to public health that takes into account the reality of COVID-19, the issue of vaccines. And we see that there is a failure here. I'll continue then. Okay, so I'll just summarize. There's a few points here in this area. I might need more than 10 minutes, but I'll do what I can. So, I need to focus on this issue of public health. Now we have COVID-19. In future, I hope we won't see it, but we certainly could have other pandemics. So issues like the environment, the need to have a deep collective reflection to be able to get through this coronavirus crisis. Regarding migration and the migratory crisis, well, we are needed. We need to develop a fruitful, constructive dialogue on migration. So I insist that there is a need for a holistic, common approach that will allow a sustainable and deeply rooted approach to the various crises that the Western Mediterranean is going through, or could go through in the future. So I'd like to reaffirm this. And I agree with the points you made. Now, Algeria wants to promote the visibility of 5+5 dialogue within the framework of its ministerial conference, and within various different instances of dialogue. And I'd like to remind you that the last one took place in Malta in 2012. We need more visibility, better prospects, and this should breathe new life into the 5+5 dialogue. I'd also like to propose a follow-up and creating a a mechanism for following up the various decisions that are made in meetings. So that we can have a continuous assessment. That will help us to develop our vision. And it will help us to update our working methods. This assessment process will help us to further reinforce those mechanisms that work and reveal where there is a lack. So I'd like to finish by saying that the 5+5 dialogue is a very useful cooperation framework. It is a flexible mechanism. It's been effective, and it will help further in future to develop the cooperation and partnership between the two shores, and also to sort out the difficulties and get us through the crises that we may see in future. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Noureddine.
Thank you so much for this presentation, and we will have comment at the end. Now, the floor is for Ana Helena from Portugal. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce que je peux parler en anglais? L'invitation, c'est une initiative très utile.
Thank you, and thank you for this initiative to be here together to discuss about the dialogue plus 5+5. I'm going to carry on in English.
Portugal has been very actively engaged in reinforcing this 5+5 dialogue because we consider that is in fact an instrument for enhancing our cooperation between our countries, our 10 countries, and also the strengthening of the political dialogue, which we believe is quite important for the promotion not only of economic development, but fundamentally the regional solidarity that has been mentioned also here in other statements. In particular, we value the fact that this is a dialogue that is among our countries in a very informal and frank way, which allow us for discussions that are useful for the pursuit of the objectives of this dialogue. And the recent 25th anniversary of the Barcelona process in November 2020 has once again reminded us that having a powerful Mediterranean partnership remains a strategic imperative shared by all of us, and the challenges the region faces require more than ever common responses. By acting together and recognizing our growing interdependence, and once again in a way of solidarity, we will hopefully be able to turn common challenges into common opportunities, such as is the case of this challenge that we are all facing with the COVID-19. And such was the spirit that has nurtured the proposal by the European Union for a renewed partnership with the southern neighborhood, a new agenda for the Mediterranean, an agenda based on the stated necessity of relaunching and strengthening the mutual partnerships, hopefully contributing to the development of the Mediterranean into an area of enhanced dialogue, exchange, peace, and prosperity. The COVID-19 pandemic has indeed strained our health and social care systems, among other relevant consequences that we all need to reflect upon as we are doing here today. But these lessons learned from the health crisis have also enabled joint work and knowledge sharing, sanitary measures, scientific research, developments, positive effects of a situation that has been indeed quite difficult for all of us. The task of our recovery, our common recovery, is now at hand across our region after a period where the pandemic has once again highlighted the strong interdependence between our countries and our economies. This opportunity that this post-COVID period represents is hopefully capable of untapping a potential for more sustainable growth and prosperity, as has also been mentioned in the first statements here in the opening of this seminar. So in this sense, the socio-economic recovery in the region will surely be enhanced if we are able to promote an alignment between our horizontal priorities. On a more operational level, such an alignment can target several domains that have common interest between our countries, like the green and digital transition that has been mentioned, that it's extremely important. We are on the verge of new situations in this regard. The question of climate change, energy, the blue economy that has also been mentioned here, the youth issues, mobility and migrations, to name just a few. Green and digital transitions, for instance, they are at crossroads of some of the key structural challenges faced by our countries, and many lessons recently taken from the COVID-19 pandemic. As we all know, the region is one of the world's hotspots regarding climate change, water pressure, and according to recent studies, is hitting at a very fast rhythm. And we all know that we had this meeting in Cairo in October the 4th, where we had the opportunity to have some discussions on the climate change issues. But there are, of course, also here opportunities to take advantage of the sunlight, the wind, and which have great economic value in the field of renewable energies. As for digitalization, it has become a real necessity to all of us, and we cannot postpone further, because it offers great potential for the recovery and economic growth and cooperation. The European Union and southern partners also should work on projects to improve digital infrastructure throughout the Mediterranean. At the same time, of course, we must be alert to new risks like the vulnerability of critical infrastructure, the problems of disinformation, but this is, of course, well known to all of us. Another hard lesson resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic is, in fact, the question of resilience that Daniel has been exposing in a very frank and clear way. And the new emphasis is needed on economic diversification and the structure of productive and value chains, namely the risks of depending on distant or scattered networks of strategic supplies. So investing in youth is in fact crucial in this stage that where we all are. And working on empowering new generations to become agents of change, an investment that should happen at different levels, will of course allow and lead to employment opportunities and then to prosperity. And this will have, of course, a positive impact on the migration issues. More importantly, we should seize this window of opportunity to really strengthen our partnership and our dialogue between our countries. It is very important to bear in mind that, unfortunately, the Mediterranean as a whole is still considered having one of the lowest levels of regional integration, and we must work together to discuss this situation in a region that clearly requires a regional dimension, and to many of where many solutions require a regional dimension. So maybe this is time to develop pragmatic initiatives that have been also mentioned here in this regard, and seizing this incredible challenge that we had in front of us for all these 1.5 years, and we draw lessons and increase solidarity and dialogue towards a better future to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna-Lena. Je donne la parole à Madame l'ambassadeur de la Tunisie.
Now the floor is to the ambassador of Tunisia. It is going to be the second event, 5+5, where she participates. She already participated in the 5+5 in Alicante, and now she's going to speak about the situation in Tunisia. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Javier. C'est un plaisir de...
Thank you, Javier. It is a pleasure to be here, especially ici à Madrid, but you were also in Madrid. And also the meeting 2018, so my dear colleagues and all the responsible here, we are together in this MedThink 5+5 network, and my thank you also for the European Institute for IEMed and its president UPM and its general secretary. And also to Casa Árabe. It is our house here in Madrid that is always provide us with the opportunity to be together among friends or brothers and sisters. If we are together today in the framework in this new normal, the dynamic resilience, we have just spoken about it, it is also an element that we have to take into account for the future of this 5+5 dialogue in a Mediterranean in mutation. I apologize for the absence of my colleague, my Tunisian colleague, but we have just finished the formation of the new Tunisian government after the decision of the 5th of July to transform dramatically the political system in Tunisia, so we will always be a democracy, bien entendu. But also, Tunisia is part of the Dialogue 5+5. We had the pleasure to receive you last year to host the meeting, unfortunately a virtual meeting of the ministers 5+5, and also to organize the next one, I hope at the end of the year, and I hope it will be a success. Evidently, it's not for us. We don't question the importance of the Mediterranean for Tunisia. That would be absurd. We, East and West, we are one of these countries that look at both sides of the Mediterranean. For us, it is not an option. The important thing is that for us is something crucial from the beginning, the first days, with all the contributions we have made and our commitment in this field. When 5+5 was launched, it had a list of objectives, the regional integration, also to create a zone of security and peace in the Mediterranean before the Barcelona summit. And then we had a thematic program, for example, transport, tourism, education, defense, etc. So we have more or less 15 thematic fora that get together regularly. For example, for education, the last one was the labor one, and I had the honor of representing my country. Because we had the possibility to come here to Alicante and to the very beautiful Mediterranean Square, Plaza Mediterránea, Mediterranean Square. I'm going to recall what we decided in Tunisia. It was the 30th anniversary. It was the first meeting when we were just in the middle of the pandemic, and among the topics we tackled that year, it was together for the collective security and the partnership in the western part of the Mediterranean. So we started thinking away after the pandemic, because we saw that the pandemic came to us. We spoke security, the economic recovery. We spoke about the future of the region, and then we had a statement adopted that at that moment. And of course, today we are here to speak in this exchange forum. And I'll speak about 3 issues. First, coordination. Because when we speak of integration, we speak of coordination, also in the political dialogue and also the sectorial field, because this western part of the basin could be really take a more important weight and coordinated. And also, of course, the tools are not yet here, so we don't have all the tools to coordinate all our policy. In Alicante, we spoke about work, labor, and the evolution of labor systems and the answers that every one of us gave to the labor problems caused by the pandemic. But we didn't leave the forum, the summit, with a roadmap. So yes, we were in pandemic, so the coordination was a little bit less important, but we debated after the meeting, and we spoke about launching a follow-up committee, because it is important to know the experiences of others. It's one of the objectives of our dialogue, and also to see if I am interested in a tool developed by Spain or Portugal or Algeria or Morocco. How can we so that this dialogue can be included in this 5+5. And then Tunisia just defended the creation of a task force. We don't have to have headquarters, but it is about delegate on very specific persons that can work in these thematic working groups, so we can move forward this structure, and also that they keep some freedom. And it is why the forum was so interesting, and also to be able to progress in a strengthened cooperation, also in the European Union and in the UPM. We also spoke about more thematic projects, like more specific projects that we could cooperate in them. For example, at the Two Shores Summit, because if we have a political dialogue, it should be followed by visible effects, so that the taxpayers can see the result of our efforts. So COVID showed the limits of the solitary work, and it just demanded, really stressed the importance of working together in cooperation, because we couldn't travel, so we couldn't progress in the implementation of different projects, and the consequences of the pandemic were not the same everywhere, but all was to put on a standstill plenty of things for this impossibility of traveling or the mobility, and that really obliged us to have more solidarity. In the south, the result is that we have seen an improvement of the integration, not only for the economic recovery, then for the vaccination campaigns. So we are not too far away, and I think that our commitment in the fact that in the Mediterranean is important for you and for us, and also to get more associated, more putting together these reflections. So that will increase the efficacy of the decisions we make. We have always the same challenges. We have a dynamic resilience, like our dear friend have said. We have security, terrorism, economic integration, the migration crisis. But we would like to have tools of positive implementation with the wish of, you have spoken of physics, I would speak of mathematics from the smallest to the biggest. So the seminar we are going to have today and tomorrow is interested in themes that are important, the regional value chains, since the COVID crisis and today, the shortages that we see in many sectors, especially in the supply chains. So we think of the importance of nearshoring, industrial nearshoring. But we have spoken about industrial nearshoring, but we haven't started yet. So it is high time to have a plan in the Mediterranean about the nearshoring, the industrial nearshoring. And it is a proposal that we also presented in the past. And we also would like to have a nearshoring for labor, for work. Because we put together our labor markets, we will be able to overcome many problems that we are having now. For example, the legal migration, also the lack of skills that sometimes we don't find on the market, and then also to work in the necessary training so that our labor markets are more harmonious than today. The second topic that we are going to debate is to ensure the water security. Bien entendu, Tunisia is one of the most affected problem, which is very important. So it's crucial to have this form of security for our countries. Our universities have started working. It is a civil committee has been created for that, and they meet regularly. And to ensure this water security, some work will be carried out within the context of 5+5. Tomorrow we will talk about that. Then the digital, that is to create transparent and open societies. And so it is of great interest for our countries and also for the administration, but also to create cities that could be really up to the expectations of our youth. I am not too fond of the 5G, but we will have to work on that. And the integration will be done if we improve the transport networks and the regional value chains. We have Transport 5+5. There is a plan of a regional plan adopted since 2007. So it's high time to rethink all these ways of regional integration. Also the relation of these entities has allowed to get to a very positive result. It was presented here in spring about the regional integration in the Mediterranean. But this report has to be rethought in really considering the pandemic. But I mean, after the summit of Barcelona, we'll have another view. I am going to invite you to continue to think of how to improve our 5+5 cooperation. We have to organize this year the ministries of foreign affairs. We have 4 or 5 other issues that are already on the table: organization of territory, training, culture, defense, health. And our Algerian colleague has spoken about health. It is a topic that maybe we would need to go deeper. And also we have in Tunisia, we are debating among us, but I propose it to our colleagues here in Spain. Maybe we can already speak about that. We would like to develop other issues. For example, the private sector cooperation, because they can have a part in these developments. So many ideas are going to come up. So, and also I am very fond of a topic with a government that is being formed in Tunisia, with an important number of women as minister. It would be a 5+5 women. So these are a few of the ideas I wanted to share.
Merci Fatma.
Thank you, Fatma, for your presentation. And I'm going to give the floor to the ambassador, two ambassadors, and I would like just to share some opinions from the Spanish part. So I take advantage of having a microphone. I totally agree with basically everything has been said here, because Spain has always defended the utility and the importance of the 5+5, but knowing that this has its limits, because to 5+5 we cannot ask them to do what they cannot. There are so many levels of the relations between the two shores of the Mediterranean, and no matter if it is between the organisms of different countries. So we shouldn't add an operational layer. For us, what we should do in the 5+5 is what was designed 31 years ago. The first meeting was in Rome, the 10th of October, 30 years ago, and we spoke about creating a cooperation framework on a sustainable basis, foundations, to make of this area an area of peace and cooperation, and including the Barcelona statement. So these being casual aspect, informal aspect has allowed all this spirit, because the western part of the Mediterranean is the most homogeneous one, with its difference and the specificities, but in the eastern part is different, the situation. So what we should do in the 5+5 is a hardcore to go to the European Union or to other organisms, and saying that all of us are sharing these concerns. But because we cannot do everything, we don't have the means are elsewhere. So if we have been living for 31 years with a lot of tempests and integration problems in the South Shore, is one of the weak points in our at 5+5 levels. We could have even greater problems. So we have to present common positions. We did sometimes, like for example, concerning water. It was like that because all the countries shared the same concern about the resources, water resources. And about health, we have seen the first reaction of the pandemic. The first reaction was every country closed up. To the planes, just stayed at the airport, everything went to a standstill. But afterwards, we just resumed a bit the activities, and the first gesture of cooperation was with the neighboring countries, towards the countries of North Africa, Algeria, Mauritania. We could have organized that better, but this approach is also like a reflex. Who are we going to help? With whom are we going to share these solutions? So, Mohamed, so you have the floor, and the mic is for you. Thank you for the organization. I would like to clarify something. I speak about the policy making of New South, so I'm not a representative of my country. I was going to say what I was going to say has been already said by my predecessors, because the diplomats usually they don't miss any occasion to speak, so I will speak. I will say some words about 5+5, and then to speak a little bit about the COVID, and then to have some personal reflections that we could have together. First, 5+5, I think everybody has stressed the importance of this forum, in the sense that it allows people and entities that don't have the occasion of meeting together and exchange in an informal way, and also to try to build specific things. Second is this utility is the importance of making like a joint between North and South, and we need that. We don't ignore that there are realities that force us to oblige us to continue with this cooperation North-South, and not to miss any occasion to do that. I can see that this forum is consolidating its role with a lot of humbleness, but in a very efficacious, very efficient way. And the work would be even better if it would be more in the media of the civil societies. And the last thing is, there are things very pragmatic that are made in silence, and we should congratulate ourselves for this efficacy. Things that are maybe are not priorities, but for example, when you speak environment, health, education, are contexts that become more and more important. The COVID-19 has shown the priority, the importance of these aspects. And it has been maybe thanks to the COVID that we have realized the importance of all these fields. In September, we realized that it has changed many things in our lives as human beings, in our social relations, in a geostrategy. So it's something that is going to have a lasting impact in several generations. It revealed the vulnerability both in North and South, and I think the COVID has somehow democratized the suffering, because all of us were just facing the same challenges, And the COVID brought some uncertainty. We don't know if it is going to get to an end or no, if there are new variants, if we are going to really have this normal life, but it will be another normal, the new normal, but not the one we lost. And for us in the South, to manage this crisis has brought a lot of suffering and also an unprecedented debt in the South countries that are really going to hamper their economic development. But in spite of trying to the European Union could really recover in spite of all these problems, and they've given an example of resilience, and also they have helped the economy of the 27 countries. So for the South are going to face a lot of difficulties. The debt is going to be extremely heavy, and our youth, our young people are expecting jobs. Women expect that there will be some improvement in their status. We say that every crisis is an opportunity, is what we've said. So, yeah, the crisis can be an opportunity for all of us. For co-building together this new normal that is going to come with the end of COVID-19. We were always told that they are renewing the partnership, that it will be better than last time, that we are construct this partnership. But I think when we speak a lot of the same thing and we don't move forward to action, we are going to end up not believing in it. So I think north and south of the Mediterranean, we are not entitled to really to frustrate the expectancy of so many people, expectancies of for the future, and so we should translate all these ideas in some tangible solutions. So some reflections before giving the floor to other speakers. First, we should together change our respective perceptions of the other. We have to keep working on that and to resist some instinctive answers and try to understand one another. We have to work together on a really authentic Mediterranean strategy where the 5 North and 5 South could really be engaged in an authentic and truthful way, and also efficient, and also that we could internalize the Mediterranean dimension in a more real way in our policy, in our strategy, in our policies. So the last thing, we as southern countries, we have to do our homework, our tasks. We shouldn't wait so that the 5+5 improvements and then just wait for their successes. But we as southern countries, we should assume our responsibilities in all levels, starting with relaunching this project of the Union of the Maghreb Arab. So I really greet the General Secretary who's among us, and I hope he is going to give us some beautiful surprises for tomorrow. And last thing, maybe you are going to think it's a bit naive, but I think that we all should promote some mindset, some trans-Mediterranean mindset and alchemy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's becoming more and more difficult to say something original, so allow me to be brief. I'm not going to try to come back to everything that's already been said and be repetitive. But first of all, allow me to greet this initiative, the organization of this conference. I think it's very interesting to think further about these issues. Hopefully, while the pandemic is subsiding, I think one agrees on the importance of multilateral frameworks and the challenges that we're facing transcend borders, but also there are bilateral tensions that can arise between different countries in the region. I think these multilateral frameworks are very useful to overcome these obstacles. So I think that's something we need to remember. It's very important to have these sorts of frameworks to get round certain difficulties which would be very difficult otherwise. Yes, I think we need to work on very practical things. I think too much politics undermines the effectiveness. I think we shouldn't get lost in politics. Politics should be at the service of specific initiatives which bring us where we need to go. Now, I speak personally not just for the European Union, but this is the basis of the European construction, is to start with small, specific steps to move towards something more ambitious later. There are different areas that the speakers have mentioned. So there's the digital transformation, energy transformation, the blue economy, promoting value chains, more local, regional value chains. I'd like to remind you that Europe has, with the new Commission, is moving in the environmental direction. This is really coincided with the beginning of the crisis. And some speakers have already said this, but I think it was Churchill who came up with the phrase, "Never waste a good crisis." The pandemic is going to demand a huge public expenses to get out of this crisis. Now, while we're spending public money, we need to use it to promote the digital transition, to promote the energy transition for southern countries, for example. Green hydrogen is one good example. Now, if we're going to invest, we need to invest to build back better. I think that's a leitmotif that has returned a number of times. I don't fully agree that solidarity has been lacking in this crisis. The initial reflexes are what they are. No one should lay the blame for the errors made, because we were making this up as we went along. This was something completely new to us, and try to come up with a new response to something we didn't have experience of. Now, the European Union in the area of public health, which Ben Ferra mentioned, whom I greet if he's still here, connected. This has allowed us to develop a very useful cooperation and very specific cooperation in the response to the crisis. This is a major milestone. The European Union, with its member states, represents the main contributor to the COVAX instrument, which is a solidarity instrument. So I don't think everything's been negative. Now, the 5+5, it does need to bring together the two shores of the Mediterranean, but the aim is also to bring together the countries of the south together amongst themselves. And I'll go even further. The European Union has a very strategic approach to its relations with Africa. And I think we should look at these initiatives in the 5+5 initiative. Certain economic developments, by their very nature, should bring us further into Africa in some cases, in certain areas. So, for example, energy networks, and these sorts of difficulties. That's all from me. I think that needs a coffee break, and I will return the floor to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the audience? We could take them now. Yes, go ahead. Mr. Mechosh. The term that's often used in Arabic to translate resilience, to express this concept, is ta'aklum, and ta'aklum is a dynamic resilience. The term itself means dynamic resilience, and that's the ability to adapt. And the ability to adapt is dynamic by its very nature. So there are no problems in Arabic. Well, that would be a nice name for a program. Perhaps we could use that Arabic word for a meeting or a program. Yes. Yeah, another question over there. Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Matani from the network Enuma. One of the comments I'd like to make regarding to COVID, it brings the public actors right into the centre. We're in a very liberal position in cooperation in our speeches, and I think this crisis has shown the importance of the state and of public actors and agencies, and I think that's been a positive thing. Now, in the area of the economy, which I know better, there are some things which were exemplary. What the Tunisian health ministry did to try and get the ecosystem innovation work to bring about solutions, what we're doing with clusters in Morocco to try and create made in Morocco solutions, whether it's artificial respiration systems, masks in Catalonia, Axio, for an area that you know well, which has created a platform for a collaboration between clusters together to create solutions from school to the home to respond to the health crisis. So I think all of these agencies and actors have come back to the centre, and they've done a lot of communication, and I think it's given them great value, and I think that's been very interesting. And I think that's something positive for the public as well. Thank you very much. I'm going to give the floor to Noureddin Benflika from Algeria, who's asked for the floor. Thank you for giving me the floor again. I'd like to clarify what I said about solidarity in fighting against COVID-19. What I wanted to say is that we need to have future cooperation and dialogue so that we can face up to future possible pandemics. So international solidarity, especially of the European Union, there was definitely solidarity from the European Union. And so I'd like to thank the Europeans for the help that they gave to the southern shores, especially Algeria. So and what I wanted to say, though, is that there's been, it was reactive response. And we worked a lot with Ambassador Brooks in this area. And it's work that was done off the cuff, something that we had to learn as it occurred. It took us a few months to think about how to work together, how to come up with the convention together, how to organize and coordinate our efforts. So it was a reactive process. Regarding future prospects, I suggest that there should be proactive steps taken. Now, if there's any future pandemic, I hope there isn't, but we need to have urgency mechanisms to respond swiftly to any future crisis. For example, the vaccine. There's a serious problem here. Some countries in the south have opted for various different forms of vaccination. For example, in Algeria, we have a number of different vaccines. Some have been formally accepted by the European Union, others haven't. And that has an impact on mobility. If students want to go to Europe, and it has an impact on cooperation in general. Now, I was vaccinated by a vaccine that has not been formally accepted by the European Union. Or at least by some countries of Europe. And so that has affected my mobility. And that's an example that is noteworthy. There are others as well, other difficulties that there are a number of parts of the population that people are encountering because of types of vaccination. So we need to have a proactive approach to this. And we need to come up with this proactive approach together so that we can face up to possible future crises, health crises. Now, I'm not certainly not questioning the solidarity of the European Union, not at all. We're very much grateful to the European Union. And I'd also like to thank the Moroccan ambassador for all the work that's been done as ambassador for the European Union in Algeria, Mr. O'Rourke. John O'Rourke has done a wonderful job, and I think this is an issue that also relates to water, the environment, especially natural disasters. In the southern shores, we need the European experience. There are neighbours in the northern shores need to help us in a proactive way. We've had forest fires in Algeria. We've had and this solidarity needs to be looked at and further developed so that we can have the right sort of reaction. I don't want to take up a lot of time. This is a very Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who's taken the floor. Madame Corinne Hablaert from IEMed. Allow me just to quickly return to two issues. The first one, Mr. Butch said that we shouldn't ask the 5+5 to do what isn't the competence of the 5+5 in operational terms. Now, if it's not in operational areas, perhaps it could be crisis management. You referred to the intentions that involve certain countries of the 5+5. Now, to what extent does the 5+5 offer a useful platform for crisis management? And on the other hand, to what extent do these crises affect the work of the 5+5? Second comment, relating to what Ambassador Louis said, the work of 5+5 needs further media dissemination. Now, a forum such as MedThink 5+5, if we see there's a political will to put this work more into the media, this type of forum could be a springboard for further mediation. And so the question is, what could be mediatized? A specific measure should be mediatized, and if it were a specific measure, what should be mediatized? Thank you. Yes, just briefly, I think the existence of 5+5 as a forum of meeting north-south, but also between countries in the south, it's already useful in itself. We've seen how countries who sometimes have bilateral crises, and they are nevertheless happy to sit down in dialogue on issues of common interest. Because around the Roundtable, there are other partners who can help and who can mediate, facilitate, and that in itself is positive. Madam Ambassador talked about maths and physics. I'll talk about biology. If it's the organ that creates the organ or the organ that creates the function, I don't really know. But 5+5 is to work on something that hadn't existed before. It would need to be invented. Now, it's 30 years now that we share this little bit of sea, and we feel the need to sit down together and to discuss these things. Yeah. Everyone has neighbours and who are close to us, but we're all in the same building, and we need to share these things. Noedine talked about principles, the principle of non-interference, principles of sovereignty, the principle of respect for territorial limits. But I've seen in the corridors leaders of countries that were going through bilateral crises, and yet they gave each other a hug, or they kissed to greet, and this in itself is useful. And they got there because there was a 5+5 meeting. So we don't have direct power. We're not the blue helmets like the UN, but we don't want it to become rigid with budgets and rotating presidencies. And what's good is that every year it's a little bit different who hosts the meeting, and we have ministers of foreign affairs. We're going to host them by the end of the year if conditions allow it. I'd like to give the floor to our ambassador. Yes, I'd like to reply to a very interesting point made on the role of the state. I think in all of our societies, there's been a re-establishment of the role of the state. What I'd like to point out is that this re-establishment of the role of the state it shouldn't make the state too big-headed and go beyond certain limits. It's about society and the state creating a new social contract after this these human and economic and social struggle. And I think there are signs that show that our states have understood the need to build a new social contract. Thanks to everyone for this, and we'll now go to the coffee break. Thank you.
Bonjour.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I am Blanca Moreno Thompson. I am the director of the Center for the Mediterranean Integration that was under the umbrella of the World Bank for a long time, and now it is under the umbrella of the United Nations. It is an honor to be here, and I thank you, the 5+5 and the Union for Mediterranean. It really is an honor to chair this meeting and on a topic that has been already presented in other meetings, but we are going to deepen in it with people that are on the spot at business level or research level, and they're going to give us their opinion. Ms. Yutiva, the General Secretary of the Union of the Confederation of Enterprises in the Mediterranean, Kasi Ben Ahmed, who is the founder and president of the Mediterranean Initiative for Development, Monsieur Manuel Notari, which is the delegate and CEO of Anima. Anima, translated in Spanish, it means that you're in good mood. Mr. David Entori, which is a research fellow at the Italian Institute for the International Politics Studies. Thank you. I'm going to take advantage of my role as moderator to introduce the subject and also to inspire the conversation. Before the pandemic, the percentage of the world trade through the global value chains had shown a huge increase until 2008. After the crisis in 2008, there was a downshifting, especially after 2010. It wasn't the pandemic that made this change, so we need to reflect on this change. It is from 2010 we have felt a decrease, because I'm talking about the world in general, and then I will talk about Mediterranean. So there was a soaring percentage. It is not the case from 2010. The pandemic is speeding up this trend because the downshifting continues. This is the first date I wanted to say. Then in the Mediterranean level, if we compare the trade flow between the South Mediterranean and the European Union between 2002 and 2008, there is a decrease. In 2008, the percentage of the trade between the Mediterranean and the European Union, there was 29% in 2010, whereas in 2018 it was decreased to 15%. This is a fact, but this is an issue when we consider the integration, because we commercialize more with Africa and Asia. It is at the price of having a lower trade with the European Union. We have to reflect on that. So we have to reflect how to strengthen these regional value chains. And it would be okay to saying so, like the suppliers are not available in Asia because there were plenty of items we couldn't import from Africa from Asia due to the pandemic. So we could just propose, well, they could come from the Mediterranean. It's not that easy. There are obstacles in the environment and the business environment. There is a lot of treaties for the trade liberalization between the European Union and namely Tunisia and Morocco, but there is a lot of obstacles that represent, there is protectionism, for example, the rules of origin, that represent also a difficulty, and also the infrastructure. So all these projects, north-south, and also the need of renew certain commercial agreements because there wasn't dispositions about the work market or the environment. I think I have spoken too much. It's just some ideas to just stimulate, to feed the debate. And now I give the floor to Ms. Boutiba. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bianca, I prepared a presentation in English.
Of the panel, according to what we see in the region and the work we are doing. So as Bianca said, we are representing employers association in the Euro-Mediterranean region. We have more than 25 countries represented, and we work a lot with different nationality and different perspective. So what we saw in this, particularly in these 2 years, indeed the pandemic has played a role to give us time to think about the challenging we are facing in our region and to see our strength, but also our weakness, and to rethink our new models for the region. So in order to enhancing the regional value chains, as it is the topic of this session, we have a lot of work to do and to work on the region reconfiguration model to equilibrate in a win-win situation for our both shores of the Mediterranean in terms of reforms, of business environment model to attract European investment in Maghreb countries. As one of the questions you have highlighted, Bianca, we have to rethink a more sectorial, gradual approach of a deep and comprehensive free trade area, which was working with the European Commission and certain members of certain countries of South Mediterranean, in a short term to a medium term instead of general model of trade and cooperation. So we cannot duplicate the same model, for example, in Tunisia and Morocco and Algeria. So each country has a different culture, each country has different system to function. So they should reformulate the free trade area in order to have it functionate in the South Mediterranean region. We also have to work on understanding the problems hindering the instrument climate in the North Africa rather than politicize the debate. What does it mean? That means that they go directly to the governments. They should, I'm talking about this agreement they are signing, they should consultate always the multi-stakeholder approach in order to have the perspective of the private sector, civil society, association, local authorities, municipalities. All this multi-stakeholder approach is something is quite missing in this negotiation. So it's kind of barrier. We also think about having the focus on the role of the new digitalized, and we saw with this pandemic that digitalization, we have no other choice. So digitalizing this platform for European investors and raise awareness about the strength and competitiveness by promoting success stories and communication on needs and perspective from both sides. On this perspective, we have tried to work with our partners in a project in a kind of business country desk platform, and here we have one of our partners, which is Anima. It's a public-private platform in order to have business online. It's a new tool that we will try to promote in the region and try to use in the region. You can do business online, you can do event on B2Match online, and maybe in the future it will be one of the tools that most of the business community will use. And for the future, we're working on this platform with the International Trade Center, which is also have a platform with all the specificity on trade and investment. Maybe in the future we can rethink the business in terms of digitalization. It would be easier to have all, of course, this free trade agreement signed by the South Mediterranean region. So give a stronger role to multi-stakeholders dimension to work and approach easily the decision makers and create more impact on result and more value in terms of good governance, in terms of education, in terms of informal work, in terms of climate change, in terms of the SDGs, the 17 ones. So start from, as I just said, from civil society to trade unions, to employers, to local authority, municipality, to raise the voice to the governments. And this, for example, we have a project which is called SOLID, South Social Dialogue in the Euro-Mediterranean. And in this project, we have tried a new system. So in order to do social dialogue, which we'll call not social dialogue only, we will call it social and societal dialogue. Usually it's bipartite between trade union employers and then tripartite with adding the government. So the final voice is for the government and the final decision makers. So this time we have tried a new system. We went to the civil societies, to the trade unions and employers, and we tried to find some subjects that they will all agree on it. Of course, it's not easy to have. You know that social dialogue, it's hard tentative with the trade unions. So from this perspective, we said, what you agree on it in terms of countries and in terms of partners. You agree that all your countries are going on informal work, on corruption, on terms of climate change, on all the objectives of the SDGs. You all agree on that, right? So they all agreed on this perspective. And at the end, they came with a kind of charter, consensus charter between all these countries and all these multi-stakeholders, and then they bring it to the ministers, and the ministers signed the charter, and they agreed on the charter specificities and to work on it as a regional perspective. And now we are continuing the model, adding more and more countries. So the approach of coming from the scratch and then going to the decision maker, this is something that we have to rethink in a regional perspective, and maybe the same thing for Dialogue 5+5, and the same thing that also is done by UFM and other organizations representing the Union for the Mediterranean. So we also, in this project, of course, involved the most important organization, which is the International Labour Organization, and they following all this perspective with the tripartite involvement in terms of having this government sensitized by the subject for these civil society partners. One other proposal on this topic was the need in terms of infrastructure, labor skills, and knowledge transfer. For infrastructure perspective, I would just say that the transport and logistics sector should benefit more from digitalization process leading to the automation of process and standards. There is a great opportunity to bring together logistic leaders from Maghreb to develop plans and policies. For example, the Algeria Transfer African Highway System. You have also the Morocco El Burak high-speed rail trains. So it was Africa first high transportation from Africa to Europe commercial corridor. You have also the Egypt Alexandria port. So there is a competition for central corridor across the Europe, Mediterranean, and Africa. So the three trans-Mediterranean corridor emerging to enhance this trade between Europe, Mediterranean, and Africa, and this is important for the food chain. As you mentioned, Asia, we don't have to wait for the product and the import and the export from the Asian countries. So through these true triangular countries, I will not say countries, but region, we can do some things from our own. So regional integration plays a pivotal role in today's logistic landscape, and it's a key development focus. In terms of labor skills and knowledge transfer, so the new area with digitalization led to rethinking of skills models to fit into the current labor demand. So we must strengthen linkages between vocational education and training vet, institution, and employees association. We saw that in the region, most of the youth graduate, they're not fitting into the labor market. So we have to do work with universities, also with think tanks, with employees association, with enterprises. We have to approach, to check a new approach in order to match all this youth generation with in terms of employment, of course, to help them integrate the new jobs. So we also involve all the business support organization, the private sector, the firms, and also the donors that are giving many grants in bilateral region and also in regional perspective. They have to work on this training aspect and on the vets. Also, within all these multi-stakeholders, organize more campaign, sorry, 1 minute, see? So, get back to this, just for youth to insist on this in terms of upskilling and reskilling. And as I have 1 minute remaining, maybe if you have another question, they ask for more, I mean, in terms of dialogue 5+5, what we can bring from outside, what we can propose. This is the proposal, is to work on the multi-stakeholder approach, of course, in terms of legal reforms, jobs offer, opportunity, and as we say, the proverb in Tunisian, that means a hand cannot clap by itself. So we have to all work together. I think we have enough organization here that can act in the floor and not only think and debate and do some consultation. We have to act on the ground and do some action for the future generation. It will not be in 5 years, it will maybe not be in 10 years, but at least for the future generation, we have to leave some impacts and some concrete actions. Thank you, Bianca.
Thank you so much. It was excellent. The need to have a multi-stakeholder approach, including the universities and the youth. Now I'd like to give the floor to Gassi Ben Ahmed. What are your views? Quelles sont vos opinions par rapport
What are your views on the regional value chain? How can it be reinforced? Do we need to have free trade? You have a lot of experience in this, and I give you the floor. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers. It's always a pleasure to be in Madrid, in the Casa Árabe. So once again, thank you for inviting me and for taking the time to organize this forum, which I think is very important in a region that's changing very quickly. Within the MDI think tank, we've worked a lot on the issue of closeness between the European Union and the southern Mediterranean, the EuroMed, because we're convinced that it's very important in the south of the Mediterranean to learn of the advantages of a market as big as the European market, a bit like the way Mexico has developed alongside the United States. Now, there's a lot of criticisms of that, but when you develop, it's normal that there are criticisms and but having said that, we're based in Tunisia. We worked a lot on the free trade agreements, and we're among the few civil society organizations that is in favor of getting close to the European Union, perhaps because we're apolitical. We don't use ALECA to criticize the government or its initiatives. And also because we want to be objective. Now I'm going to come to the issue on the value chain because I'm looking at it from a different angle. So I'd like to start with my conclusion by saying yes, dialogue 5+5 is essential, even if it's not binding to member states. It's essential not just to exchange ideas, I think this is a time when the Mediterranean is no longer at the center of European concerns, and even certain countries in the southern Mediterranean. And we see this in various different circumstances. I was amazed during the confinement when the European Commission presented its strategy for a southern neighborhood being renewed. This was in February last year. Now, there were just 5 people who showed up, 5 people in Brussels to listen to the commissioner, the neighborhood commissioner, to talk about his strategy on EuroMed. And amongst these 5 people, there were 2 who wanted to ask questions on the Balkans. So it was really just 3 people. So a dialogue forum such as 5+5 is necessary in order to focus on the Mediterranean, to bring it back to the table, and to anticipate certain problems, or reach certain conclusions that could be useful, and to foster economic reform in the south, because that is the keystone of all cooperation, any kind of shared prosperity. Nothing will happen if we don't have the right economic reforms that we need. And the issue of economic reforms, well, when we see countries in the East who've come to the European Union and become members, they wanted to become members of the European Union. Now that southern Mediterranean countries couldn't do so, now we have to find other motivations to reach these results. And it's not just important for the South, but also to make the European Union a solid bloc to face up to Asia and an America that's more and more isolationist. to reinforce transatlantic relations with Biden, well, this is a challenge. And now European Union is with Mediterranean and Africa. And so that's where we need to make the greatest efforts. And that also has to be reflected in the strategies and politics of the European Union. No European Union policy explicitly mentions the southern neighborhood. We know all of the industrial policies, the white paper, but they don't talk about the neighborhood policy of the south. It's as if the Mediterranean is mentioned in a residual accessory manner. So it's normal that this needs to be looked at. Now, in order to be able to move forward together, we need to have a long-term view, and we need a common project. And that really summarizes everything I have to say. A long-term view means what kind of statute do you want for the southern countries? Romano Prodi, who was president of the Commission, said that you need to have the courage to say that one day, in 25 years perhaps, for the 50th anniversary of the EuroMed, we will have the four freedoms. And that's the freedom to move. That's the challenge to be able to bring the southern countries up to the level of the northern countries, which would reduce the desire to migrate. And secondly, we need a common project. We can't do anything without a common project. We felt in the south, and I'm speaking as a Tunisian, that everything that the European Union was proposing was for commercial liberalization. It seems to be a free change agreement, a free trade agreement. So it was too much focused on free trade and not enough on a common construction. The COVID crisis has brought back into the foreground the possibility of having value chains that can be relocated close by, even if we know that the world of the future is going to look a lot like the third world. But we need to ask the question of regional value chains, not in a static way. We're not there to bring, to bring the toy industry from China to Morocco, for example, but perhaps in a dynamic way. Maybe the batteries, electric batteries of the future. Tunisia, Morocco should do this, and so the question is, what's getting in the way? And now, everything's getting in the way. In Tunisia, everything. Since the port of Radesh, or 95% of our exports go, I think the real test for the future in Tunisia, which has got the economic reforms as a priority, the real challenge is to be able to reform the port of Radesh, to have a strategic player to manage the port. I think the Dutch are interested, but the idea would be to privatize logistics. Now we have ineffective players, and that leads to a trade overcost and delays of up to 2 weeks in the port, which is terrible economically. Nothing will be done without reforms. Now, I understand that economic reforms are expensive from a political point of view. Of course, Tunisia is going through a democratic transition period, and so suddenly, politically and financially, there's reduced room for maneuver in terms of finance, because we need to look at our macroeconomic situation and settle the accounts. So all of this requires a dialogue again with the European Union. I prefer not to use on the side, but a partnership for economic transition to make Tunisia a proper collaborator to help the country in this delicate phase where we need to make a number of expensive reforms to reach this common objective. So for value chains, yes, there's a significant interest there, but Tunisia, since it became independent since the 80s, has come onto the global economy because of its value chain, and that this should continue. We had a conference with Labert and La Connect within Tunisia, and there we compared the production costs of 4 countries, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, and Jordan, and Eastern European countries, and Tunisia is competitive. We can have value chains in Tunisia as long as we have the right reforms. I'd like to add 4 things briefly, if I've got time. 1 minute. Okay, 4 essential points. We need civil society on board. We need to review this term. What do we understand by participation of civil society? Well, it needs to be looked at seriously. We need to have increased effort to communication and teaching, because a long time when the minister came to Tunisia, and it was just the 4 or 5 actors always, and it didn't move things forward. So we really do need to review how this is explained, and we also need to look at infrastructure, and we need finding there. UFM is open to other sources, not just from the member states, so beyond. We will need to perhaps bring them into the UFM rather than having anecdotal and sparse initiatives, in the Gulf states and Asia, rather than just doing it bilaterally. Training young people, mobility, migration, I think we really need to look at these issues. COVID-19 has showed that working from home works, it can have a positive impact, and that we can work at a distance. And if you can work at a distance, why not work from the southern Mediterranean? Now, and of course, Europe, Mediterranean, Africa, that vertical, we need to see. I think one thing I'd like to, alongside communication and dissemination, perhaps we should have a training center for MEDIC in Tunisia, and to institutionalize the various initiatives which aim to provide funds from the European Union or other funders for young people in Tunisia and Morocco, so that they can be trained, and to really focus on training more than on education, because education takes time to change, but in the short term we really do need training, training, training. So now we can continue the debate. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're right to say that we need to go beyond liberalisation to talk about common construction, and I think that doesn't just apply to Tunisia but the whole region. Now I'm going to give the floor to Emmanuel Natari, the General Director of ADIMA. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Blanca. Thank you for inviting us. It's always a pleasure to address the public here and your partners. Now, I think this issue of value chain is true, and it's going to intensify in the Mediterranean. It's an opportunity Now, there are 3 important trends that can make this a reality. Firstly, there's digitalization, automation in industry. That reduces costs. So it's less interesting to produce things further away. So you can produce close to where you are. That's interesting. Second trend is sustainability and climate change, which means that it's less good to produce the other side of the world and ship containers across the planet. It's better to have a circular economy, and so that also pushes us towards shortening value chains to encourage proximity. And the third trend, you've seen it this morning, is deglobalization. Countries that tends to be more and more protectionist, especially with the COVID crisis. Inner companies are being weakened. That's true in the OECD, in the Mediterranean, and we're worried that companies are going to be bought off for cheap, and so we're trying to be more protectionist. So it's more difficult to have direct foreign investment. So all of that encourages a shortening of value chains, perhaps relocation. That doesn't necessarily mean that going to Asia, but there can be more diversified strategies, and I think that maybe it might be worth to bring them closer to the consumer markets in Europe. And perhaps Africa in the future. Now, what would be the obstacles? Well, it's not going to be done straight away. It won't be done from one day to the next. There's very little direct foreign investment in the world now. They find it difficult to read the market, and when things happen, it usually takes about 5 years for companies to adopt these sorts of strategies. I also think we need to think about world demand and not supply. There's an International Trade Center in Geneva which did very interesting work. They were looking at the productive capacities of the southern Mediterranean countries and emerging countries in terms of the changes in world demand. And they're looking at what the strong areas were. And what comes out as the strong sectors? Well, Morocco and Tunisia. For Morocco, there's this vehicle and people transport sector, chemistry, of course, and food. For Tunisia, textiles, olive oil, nothing new here. We already knew this. There are already strategies existing in these countries. So what this means is that if you want to talk about new sectors, if we want to develop new productive areas, we need to have strong will in these areas with digitalization and so on. So these new sectors, they haven't been identified yet. They don't have the productive capacities or the prospects of productive capacity in the south of the Mediterranean. Now, if you look at the obstacles, you also, and I'm thinking of the work that you've done, but we need to compare ourselves to the Asian countries. You have to see what are the comparative advantages in the between southern Mediterranean and Asia. And I did a job that Shai Zaki, who's a university professor in Kerikek, who invited me to a seminar. I think you were there, Blanca. And it was very interesting what was said there. It really inspired three areas where the Mediterranean is more equally or less competitive than Asia. The areas where southern Mediterranean is better. Okay. Firstly, it's the cost, labor cost. In the 5+5, they're better labor costs. It's cheaper than in Asia. Now, if you look at productivity, productivity is better, sometimes 4 or 6 times better than in Asian countries in the south of the Mediterranean. So that is an extremely positive area that we need to focus on. A third advantage we have is our association agreements with the European Union. This is something that is very important with international operators who want to go to into a European market. And then there are certain areas where we can say that the southern Mediterranean is comparable to Asian countries and where it could have a lever to transform that into a comparative advantage. So, for example, if you look at international classifications, all of these countries in Southeast Asia, even China and south of the Mediterranean, they're all about the 70th place for doing business in terms of as classified by the World Bank. Around number 70. But if we do work on the business environment, you could maybe move up a little bit compared to Asian countries. And these are criteria that foreign investors look at when they choose where to offshore to. And to the Global Fitness Index, the Mediterranean is a little bit behind. Asia is a little bit behind South Mediterranean. And so there's work that can be done there that can really make the southern Mediterranean more attractive. Now, there's another area where everyone's more at the same level, in other words, not very good, both in Asia and southern Mediterranean, is open up to international capital. We know the currency transfers, accounts in these countries is quite difficult, and that really slows down business, having foreign accounts, foreign exchange accounts. Now, I don't think, however, that's so difficult to approach, and perhaps within the 5+5 dialogue it can be looked at. But that's where, in the short term, however, they could make a real difference if they can facilitate the opening or the circulation of capital between Europe and the south of the Mediterranean. So these are the areas where we're more or less the same. And then there are some areas where we really need to work, where we're weak in the southern Mediterranean. First, technology. If you look at the technology of the southern Mediterranean, we're 5 or 6 times weaker than Southeast Asia or China. That's a real problem. Now we talk about these new industries. They're tech industries. So the Mediterranean really needs to move forward. Now, to move forward doesn't mean that they have to develop endogenous capacities. What we do have to do is help the SMEs to invest in research and development, R&D. And now GRC France has become the first country in terms of attracting foreign direct investment in Europe for a number of years now. And that's because there's a tool that has made us very attractive in France. It's one of the... France was always behind Germany and the UK in foreign direct investment. Now it's number one. Now it's credits, tax credits, and so you have to find ways in which SMEs invest in R&D and tax help with that. Now we also need to reinforce the purchase of international patents. That's another very important issue. Now, Blanca, you also mentioned non-tariff barriers, and non-tariff barriers that are related to integrating these value chains. So, in other words, anything to do with imports and exports. Nowadays, it's very difficult in the port to go through customs, all the forms, certificates, all of the costs and the tax are one thing, but the whole bureaucracy is very complex. And that just undermines everything. You can't have value chains if you can't export and import. So you really need to work on that. Now, what can 5+5 do? Well, I had 5 priorities, I think. One of them is to support and promote a sectoral work to direct sectoral policies of countries. And so we have to see what we're going to invest on and what not according to production capacities in the country, but according to the world demand, and in particular European demand. Secondly, support initiatives that improve the circulation of technology and encourage investment in SMEs, and I explained this thing about tax credits. And thirdly, have a common platform for measures that favour integration of SMEs, the local impact, the technology transfers, the externalization, the local training, respect for the environment, all these sorts of areas that accompany the transfer of in the southern Mediterranean. So that's when we're talking about technology. We did an initiative a few years ago called under the aegis of the European Union to create a tool. BDIS Media was involved in it, and the private sector. There are also associations such as WWF and the FDBI, and they created a tool to measure the impact on that local area. And we need to continue this work. We need to support initiatives that improve the capital flows, which I spoke about, and finally, to try to limit non-tariff barriers. Now, 5+5 is not an operator, it's not a secretariat, but it has a number of twinning and technological assistance mechanisms that can be used by the stakeholders in 5+5, which can improve these the services related to imports and exports. Thank you, Manuel, for these recommendations, especially to the 5+5. They're very useful. And I hope we'll be able to reach this before 2050. Now I have the great pleasure to give the floor to David Edindori. Thank you very much.
If you don't mind, many thanks to everyone for inviting me today. I will go directly into the topic, as the speakers already said a lot of interesting things. So, as we all well know, COVID-19 hit hard on the global economy, and the Western Mediterranean region made no exception to that. Globally, trade flows experienced a -5% in 2020, which was actually better than what was originally expected, while FDI flows experienced a much more dramatic drop, -40% according to UNCTAD data. Now recovery is underway, and trade and investment flows have experienced a considerable rebound upwards. However, there are some downside risks behind the corner that could hamper the recovery. Global supply chains are undergoing severe stress and experiencing disruptions. mostly because supply hasn't managed to keep up with demand, particularly in high-tech sectors that rely heavily on semiconductors. Moreover, the accident of the Ever Given container ship in March in the Suez Canal revealed how the economic globalization, based on the just-in-time mechanism, is subject to vulnerabilities, which expose also our Mediterranean region to significant risks. So in view of these considerations, could regionalization of supply chains be an appropriate solution? Let me anticipate that I don't have, of course, a firm answer to this question, but I will try to offer an overview of the state of the art of trade and economic integration in the region, highlighting challenges and opportunities to enhance ties along key supply chains. Trade flows were seriously hit during the most acute phase of the pandemic. In the southern Mediterranean region, trade shrank up to 40% during spring 2020, with substantial effects also on logistics, transports and movements of people. This had a serious impact also on unemployment and poverty, with the number of poor expected to increase in the whole southern Mediterranean region from 178 to 200 million. What about integration with the EU? Overall, integration in supply chains is still below potential. In general, southern Mediterranean countries are linked to EU partners occupying upstream segments of supply chains, with the main sectors being aeronautic, automotive, textile and citrus. It is worth noting that the comparative advantage analysis revealed that Morocco has a comparative advantage in fertilizers, Tunisia and Morocco in electrical machinery and equipment, and in the production of aircraft and their components. So focusing on the latter sector for enhancing future integration of the region with the EU, and in particular with the 5 countries of the northern shore, in particular France and Italy, where aircraft manufacturing is a key industry, would be crucial. This industry is technology intensive and it could support over time the upgrade of these sectors with an increase in value added, thus producing benefits for the whole economy. Also, of course, a trade treaty architecture that is well equipped to face today's challenges is necessary. So if on the one hand, 3 countries of the southern shore are involved in association agreements with the EU, Algeria, Tunisia and Morocco, we should also remind that these deals were signed in the early 2000 years. So it was good to see that some progress has recently been made. For instance, all tariffs between the EU and Algeria were recently eliminated, while the EU offered to Morocco the opportunity to discuss how to modernize the bilateral partnership within the framework of its trade policy review, which is functional to reach the target of an open, sustainable and assertive trade policy. Over time, trade integration within the Euro-Mediterranean region has progressed in terms of both trade in final products and intermediate goods, and integration in regional value chains. However, many challenges remain, especially for countries of the southern shore. These include, mainly, the fragmentation represented by diverse trade agreements, persisting non-tariff obstacles to trading goods, in particular lack of harmonization on rules of origin, although a revision of the rules of origin framework is expected within the framework of the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention. The lack of an adequate regulatory framework for trading services, inadequate transport and logistics infrastructure, and finally a business environment which is not supportive enough of the firm's ambition to participate in international trade. I mentioned infrastructure, which as we all know is crucial to facilitate supply chain linkages. Infrastructure assets are crucial to unlock long-term economic growth, all the more so at a time when the challenges posed by climate change and digitalization require our economic systems to be equipped with modern infrastructure to support the radical transition that we will be facing in the coming years. Infrastructure connectivity, especially in the southern and eastern Mediterranean, is still limited, thus reducing the speed of socio-economic integration. While in recent years, countries in the region have built extensive transport and energy networks and also created effective frameworks for PPP projects, like in Morocco and Tunisia, the level of investment is still not enough. According to the World Bank, for instance, in the whole MENA region, the needs over the next decade in terms of upgrading existing and creating new infrastructure are estimated at over $106 billion. In terms of transport, the central section of the Trans-Maghreb motorway axis, currently under construction, will be of strategic importance to better connect Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia. But there is more. As it was also mentioned before, in Morocco, the rail and port strategies are aimed at improving the quality and connectivity of railways and ports, respectively until 2040 and 2030. In Algeria, Capacity of ports will be increased in order to handle larger vessels, so to make the country a key hub in the Mediterranean. Also, in terms of energy integration, the most important project connecting the two shores of the Western Mediterranean basin is the IEMed interconnector, currently under construction and aimed at integrating Tunisia with Europe's power network through Italy in terms of renewable energies. And looking with even more ambition at the future, Morocco could be well placed to develop electric power through hydrogen, which is a promising alternative and clean energy source. The EU is clearly interested in promoting the infrastructure upgrade of the region. For instance, the EU is contributing to finance the motorway from Morocco to Tunisia, and also within the framework of the Trans-European Network for Energy, Europe is supporting the connection of its energy networks with those of its neighbor countries through cross-border projects. Its regulation is currently under review to ensure alignment with the climate neutrality objectives of the EU Green Deal, thus opening up potentially opportunities to support the energy transition in the Western Mediterranean as well. So, what next? What are the perspectives to enhance supply chains integration in the Western Mediterranean? There are several opportunities ahead of us. First of all, policymakers should consider whether and how economic globalization should be reformed after COVID. Reshoring could well be an option worth exploring for the 5+5 countries, but some conditions need to be met for this option to materialize. A clearer structure of a comparative advantage to reorganize supply chains on a regional basis in key sectors that can allow southern countries to move further downward the value chain. Skills need to be enhanced so that attention on human capital of workers should go beyond short-term needs. In this respect, for instance, more forward-looking circular migration policies could be promoted by the EU. Third, a level playing field needs to be ensured. For instance, domestic regulation should be more open to FDIs, and better harmonization in terms of technical standards and rules of origins should be pursued so to facilitate exchanges. And then, of course, improved infrastructures and business environment are essential. These reforms will be crucial to increase attractiveness of these countries, exploiting their proximity to Europe vis-à-vis Asian countries, as it was already said before. And also, the green transition could turn into a key pillar of renewed cooperation and strengthen supply chains in the Western Mediterranean, thanks, for instance, to the Green Partnership launched between Morocco and the EU in view of COP26, which will be a key milestone in our mission against climate change.
I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you to finish soon.
Okay, I will just finish, mention three very quick points. Sorry. It is also important to take into account also the international context that can influence projects of regional integration. First of all, we should also look at this trade integration within the framework of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which could offer an opportunity to reduce fragmentation in the whole region with Europe. Then we should also consider China's project through its Belt and Road Initiative and see whether there could be also complementarities or the conflictive dimension with Europe would prevail. Finally, to conclude, in my view, the pull factor played by the EU could be used by the countries forming part of the 5+5 dialogue to strengthen their ties. The so-called Brussels effect could offer ways to upgrade and modernize trade deals. And the priorities set up with respect to digitalization and green transition could provide opportunities to modernize North Africa's manufacturing and services industries, enhance infrastructure and connectivity, and improve human capital in the region. Thank you very much, and sorry if I spoke too long.
Thank you so much, Davide. It's great to see the four of you converging towards some concrete points. And we now have the luxury of having two commentators, Olivia Orozco de la Torre, who is also our host. Thank you, Casa Árabe, for gathering all of us here. She's coordinator of education and economics here in Casa Árabe. And Luis Oscar Moreno, who is an expert in a former commercial and economic counselor in the Spanish embassy in Morocco, in Rabat. Thank you. Olivia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Blanca. And first of all, thank you very much to the four speakers today, because they really gave us a very interesting and comprehensive vision of what we need to do enhancing global value chains in the Mediterranean, and especially as you mentioned, speaking from the ground, no, from knowing what you are talking about, and from the different actors or stakeholders, like Jehan mentioned, how important it is to take the different stakeholders in the picture. In that sense, it's a bit difficult to, as you said, we have very little time and to summarize, but I would like to focus in a couple of points that also connect with some of the aspects you mentioned, and I feel we all agree on the need to really create strategies and incentives to bring back the to enhance regional value chains in the Mediterranean, because not only as part of to promote economic integration, but also to bring the Mediterranean back to the international economy. No, as it was mentioned, also not only important to look at the Mediterranean itself, but also in connection with the world economy. So in that sense, I think we were. I mean, it's a topic we have been working on. There has been many forums. We have the reports made by the Union for the Mediterranean, by the Center for Mediterranean Integration. I mean, we had been in several roundtables regarding these issues. I mean, we all agree that it's key, but I would like to, if we could today, I mean, I would just to mention, we all agree that, I mean, it's a process. Now it's an opportunity to change things. As it was mentioned today, the crisis is also an opportunity, but it's also the moment to really focus in certain issues. And I would like to raise the point also mentioned by Ahmed about the need to combine and look for a common projects and a strategy. You know? And in that sense, and it was also mentioned about the need to look for a sectoral strategy, and I think that will be a key point to develop. And it was mentioned about already some issues. So in that sense, it was mentioned we have to work little by little, step by step, and work on the things have been done, and maybe look also for some success stories. And if we look for success stories, maybe, I mean, we can speak of the report from the Center for Mediterranean Integration already speaks about Morocco being as success stories in certain sectors, be it automotive and aerospatial. Now maybe Luis Oscar can speak more about that he is very well, he knows very well the issue. But I mean, if we look for that, could we think of different, which I think it will be important, and it was mentioned to really look for an strategy from not the two parts, also maybe adapted to the different countries, but think of really in which sectors or industry we need to focus to really develop those advantages that we could have. How can we bring, if we need to bring the Mediterranean into the picture, where the Mediterranean can really contribute in some value to the global economy. I mean, really need to, I mean, it was, Mr. Tentori also mentioned about some reports made about how certain countries can represent certain advantages for different sectors, but in the case, I would like if you could develop a bit more of what do you think could be the particular industries or sectors in which the Mediterranean can play a role in the global economy, in the sense of joining the common interests in the different countries and the possibilities for growth of those industries. No, we are. Shall we concentrate our efforts in these industries? We have been talking about the automotive, textile, maybe pharmaceutical in the post-COVID world. We have been talking about food, renewables. How can we articulate an strategy? In that sense, we connect also with the from the European part. I would like to have also European about the European strategy of investments in the region. I'm afraid it's not so well focused in these sectors, and maybe it will need more focus and more kind of a strategic vision in the long term, as you mentioned. So if you could develop even more about how do you think we could contribute to focus that strategy and create that common project you were talking about. And I will say I will stop here. Maybe connecting it also with the success story we want to see in the Moroccan case, because in that sense we could say that it's result of both a kind of governmental policy, but together that a governmental policy that is looking to promote export-oriented industry, but is combined with an active trade policy, but also with investment incentives in that sense. And also it has been, they had a kind of important private sector development that is going parallel or together with that. So in that sense, it's a combination of the different actors in that sense, and how it has helped to create a whole ecosystem of companies, and that is a bit what has helped to create the increase in intra-industrial trade between Morocco and Spain and also France. So in that sense, it's also in relation to this kind of approach you were mentioning. So it's a bit kind of the focus and the approach to achieve these goals. And I think I will stay here. I will stop here. I don't want to take more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Olivia. Luis Oscar.
Thank you, Blanca. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Casa Árabe, IEMed, and l'Union pour la Méditerranée for the opportunity of talking today here for a really important topic. And I really want to start with this success story that Olivia was mentioning, because in reality we have a success story about global chain or regional chain integration between Spain and Morocco. And what was there for this success? First of all, infrastructure. Second of all, a trade policy agreement, in particular an FTA that it was only about tariffs, but it was really important for increasing trade flows between both countries. And at the same time, private sector or export-oriented policies, as Olivia was mentioning. So what happened? In 2012, the agreement entered into force, the FTA, and trade flows doubled from Spain, and exports and imports with Morocco. And at the same time, Spain was the main trade partner with Morocco, and Morocco doubled its flows with Spain and with the rest of Europe. It's a very similar story to what happened with Mexico and the US. Same specialization pattern. As Monsieur Tentori was explaining, it's about intermediate goods exports down south and final exports up north. And it's interesting to see of what is lacking the agreement with the European agreements with Morocco and what Mexico and the US are having right now. Because right now, after the decoupling experiences that we are living, what we're seeing is that Mexico is the main trading partner, the first trading partner with the US. And so there is some opportunity that is taken advantage. Why? Because there is an integration, a regional integration. We have as Blanca mentioned, we have a tariff agreement, but we need a more services-oriented, NTBs-oriented regulation. And this is basically the DCFTA. So I think there is a time constraint because there are other competitors that want to profit from the opportunities that are arising because of these bottlenecks, these supply side issues that everybody is talking about. The eastern border is also a competitor, and the decisions that Monsieur Notary was mentioning in his speech, the decisions of investment are going to be taken today. They're going to take years, but they're going to be taken today, and we have to take the opportunity and we have to grab it. And qu'est-ce qui bloque, comme Monsieur Ben Ahmed was mentioning? Certification, services, NTBs, and all this is infrastructure. All this is very related to an enhanced trade policy agreement like the DCFTA, but also a connectivity initiative like the one that the Build and Bridge initiative that Monsieur Tentori was mentioning. I think we need a combination of both. We need DCFTAs that really bring to zero NTBs, services regulation, different export and import that Monsieur Notari was talking about, all the problems related to ports. But at the same time, we need an infrastructure connectivity initiative related to energy, because we're seeing now the importance of the relationship. Monsieur Tentori was speaking about these electricity initiatives, this electricity connecting of grids. There's also two interconnectivity lines between Morocco and Spain. Already there's also a gas pipeline, because Spain is not connected to the rest of Europe, but there is a gas pipeline with Algeria. It's important to create an energy hub with the Southern Mediterranean. There are energy issues right now that are talking about security in terms of energy in Spain and the rest of Europe. I think it's important to connect to the European Union grid. I think we need talking about infrastructure investments that could enhance integration with the EU, and at the same time, upgrade the FTAs that we have with the region. I think we have a success story in Spain and Morocco. The fact that Spain became the first trading partner of Morocco through exports and imports is only solely related to value chain integration. And I think it's also that has gone under the radar. Not that many people know that there's a success story of value chain integration between the northern and southern border of the Mediterranean. And I think that we need a combination of trade policy and a combination of infrastructure investment. We need like some sort of initiative in terms of connectivity, like the one of the Build a Road initiative that China has pairing along Africa and other regions. And I think it's very important because there are some debates around CBAM, carbon-based trade adjustment initiatives, and we need regulation integration with the Mediterranean, and for that we need to enhance our trade policy and we need to enhance our investment in infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luis Oscar. That was an excellent way to finish. But I believe if the organizers allow for it, we can still open up to the public, because I'm sure there are many questions and comments. So the floor is open. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I found this roundtable very inspiring, because you make concrete proposals. So thank you very much. Congratulations. You've been talking mainly about the North-South relationships. We have quite a long experience in the north of North-North relationships and integration, but I'd like to ask you where you see the potential, which is a potential of an integration South-South, which is very, very poor. I mean, it's probably one of the poorest in the world. And I'd like you explain whether you see a potential there.
Should we answer this one? Who would like to start? Or should we take another question? Okay, please.
Thank you. My point is actually very much related to the previous one. I was wondering about the nexus between South-South trade integration and nearshoring. In other words, to what extent is it possible to plan ahead for nearshoring, to coordinate efforts and avoid competition and avoid negative externality for South-South regional integration? Of course, you cannot oblige private entities to go to one place rather than another one, but I'm wondering about this nexus, regional integration, South-South and nearshoring. So that's very much in the continuity of the previous point.
Absolutely, the two questions are related, so maybe we start with the panel, and then maybe I'll add 2 cents also.
Well, I think I can try to address this question very briefly. I would say for South-South integration, we have exactly the same blockages as for North-South. It's a question of infrastructure, first of all. When you know that we are talking now for ages about the road from Morocco to Tunisia and Libya, and we are missing still 80 kilometers from one city in northwest of Tunisia to the frontiers of Algeria. and there is no political will to complete this road, at least 80 kilometers, $800 million. So infrastructure, yes, and then also South-South is seen more as in services than in goods. So Tunisians are very much present in Francophone Africa, in accounting, computer science, all kind of services, which is much more simpler than with the EU. And coming back to the remarks made by the two commentators here, I would like to say, yes, DCFTA is a solution, but DCFTA is also a blockage, because of course civil society and many people are against it and reacting violently against it, as we have seen in EU with the free trade agreement with Canada or other countries. So that's why we need, I would say, to focus on communication and pedagogy in order to explain what do we aim to do together, what is behind this deeper free trade agreement, how we reach, what are the benefits, and that we need really to put a focus on communication, which is not done enough nowadays. And as far as your comment, which industries, which value chain, I would answer it from a different angle. I would say let's unleash the private sector in the southern Mediterranean. Let's introduce competition, and you will see that solution will emerge normally, naturally. We won't have to select. Let's the market do it for us. But for that, we need to unleash the private sector, which is still very much dominated by the public sector, by inefficiencies, by all kinds of blockages. So we need really to focus on two things: communication, pedagogy, and unleash the private sector, introducing competition. Thank you.
Thank you. Yihen?
Yes, I just want to respond in the same, on the same answer, I will bring with the same two questions. So I will take an example of the success story as she was mentioning. Okay, so you're taking for me as I'm seeing all these countries cooperating together, South and North. I take this success story. You're taking the problem in the wrong side. That's why it's not working. That's what I'm seeing in this country. So one success story from this dialogue. What is social dialogue? When I say social dialogue, is a discussion and what all the legal framework are taking between the government and all the private sector, the trade unions, the employees, the startups, the civil society. Of course, I'm talking about the representative civil society and all these stakeholders. So I just give you an example of this small initiative that we took from the bottom and not from the up, from the decision maker. When we did this project, we start with 2-3 countries. So one of the output of the project is, for example, in Tunisia, we stopped the Social Economic and Council after the revolution. But just after this, the end of this project, with the cooperation with all the stakeholders, they opened the floor to a new social dialogue, social economic and council. So this is a product. What does it mean? It means that we will work on reforms. They will work on legal framework. So this will work for private sector and also for all the stakeholders. So will impact the country directly and impact the relation with other countries. The same thing for one of our members who worked on this project on social dialogue. The CGM, which is the employers of Morocco, they opened an academy of social dialogue. So what is this academy for? Is this, for example, for the startups who will implement their new enterprises, for the companies? Of course, they will open the new startups and then they think they will change the world. And then they discover they have employees, they have taxes, they have desks, they have so many things to handle, and it does not work. So this is a small thing in terms of social dialogue. So how can you expect South-South to work together as their own reforms are not working in their own countries? We are not talking about the conflict about some countries, for example, about the question of the Sahara Occidental between Algeria and Morocco. How do you expect relation between South-South and they are in competition together and they're not working? I see that many of them are working directly with European and not prefer, even if the country is just right next to them, they are not working together. So what I see from all these aspects is they have to work in their own country with the reforms, internal reforms, and then expecting to do a relation with South-South or expecting to do a relation with North-South. This will have to come from the scratch and from their own culture, and this is a problem also of a culture. That's why this dialogue 5+5 is very important for us to discuss these policies and to reunite all these representative, I insist on representative multi-stakeholder approach, and then go to the ground and apply what you have in your countries. Because if you don't start from the scratch, even all the decision makers are changing all the time. You can see in Tunisia, we just have our 11th government, our new government, so they're all changing. We have to work on this situation in order to change it in the future, to have South-South cooperation and North-South. So for the moment, as we say, the Barcelona process, even after 25 years, is not working, and we don't know if it will work in years. If we want it to work, we have to start with our own doors before knocking the doors of our neighbors.
Thank you, Emmanuel.
Yeah, about the South-South integration. So it's true that even, so I think it's 5% trade integration within the South Mediterranean region, 8% integration within the Agadir area. So it's very low. And a few years back, I organized a panel, a meeting with businessmen, individual, not organization, business industry, big industry CEO from Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, to know why there is this low integration within the Maghreb. And I think the two feedback I got from this meeting is one, and this is quite easy to solve. They don't know the opportunity. They don't know where are the possibility of integration, of collaboration. They prefer to do it with European, Italian, whatever partners. So this is really something we can solve by helping. They don't know and they don't meet, so they multiply the opportunity for meeting, knowing each other, networking, give them information on key sector opportunities, etc. This is something which is feasible. The second issue, which is more difficult to hear and to understand, is that the trade agreement in place that exists, that are signed by the country, they are not applied by the administration. So in fact, your country was supposed to have this trade agreement and supposed to facilitate your trade, and in fact it doesn't happen like it's said in the law. So in that case, it limits a lot the situation. And maybe a comment on you touched the topic of cross-fertilization and cross-sector, etc. And I think that's very, very important. I think that, yes, there is also the question of where this value chain could happen. And I think clusters where they mix type of organization, type of sectors, type of companies could be areas where this new economic business intelligence could happen, where this new partnership, because there are networks in the end, clusters could happen. Maybe there are locations where it could, and we can create networks of clusters across the Mediterranean, because we were discussing with Razi. It's not true that we will have a Euro-Mediterranean industrial policy. It will, or we have to advocate for it during 20 years, and maybe we have it in the end. But and maybe, so we should go on the field, and maybe in the end there will be this policy because it's happening. And maybe networks of clusters could be a space where this value chain could happen, provided they know about the opportunities, the sector's trends, and what they could do, and provided they have the means to meet, etc., etc. But it's not. We listed a number of other blockages, but this is a place where this can happen.
Thank you. David?
Yes, I would like to address very quickly the question on how reshoring could happen and how long it might take to make it happen, actually. So I think, of course, there is nothing set in stone, but and also market forces should be left free to take their decisions, but probably a two-step approach could be considered. So first one, structural reforms. So once they have been implemented and they are in place, the business environment would be improved and it would be more competitive, for instance, through enhanced skills, which would make investments also more convenient. And this would probably spontaneously redirect private sector decisions to Southern Mediterranean countries. And second, the renewed policy framework, this renewed strategy taken by the EU in terms of the industrial policy aimed at making the EU more independent in terms on key strategic industries. This could probably, as I was saying before, hopefully act as a pull factor involving Southern Mediterranean countries which are already involved in some technology-intensive supply chains. So this could help also to facilitate nearshoring in the future.
Thank you. Am I allowed to make some comments? Okay. Are there any more questions? Okay, so maybe I can just pick it up where the panel left it and give you my 2 cents regarding the obstacles that are faced by countries in the south. Definitely, they're not the same as in the north, because at least in the north, it's okay. But no, because my comments are related to the first 2 questions. So I finish and then I give you the floor. Sorry, I'll be brief. No, I was just thinking that the obstacles that are faced by the countries in the south are definitely not the same as in the north of the Mediterranean, because in the north of the Mediterranean you have the European Union framework. So that's the first difficulty. If we have the Barcelona Declaration, the Agadir Agreement, but this has not translated into laws that are harmonized, regulations that are harmonized. There's a lot of work to do. I don't know what is exactly the roadmap that we should have, but many of the laws are obsolete, and countries, if they do it alone, let's say you pick a tax or a regulation, if they do it alone and think of how to negotiate a bilateral agreement, trade agreement with the EU, it's going to be less effective. It would be much better for countries in the south to harmonize first and decide what they want to ask the EU before facing the EU. The problem is that we have isolated progress in Tunisia or in Morocco, but it's not a bloc, and there is not enough dialogue south-south, and that's why the 5+5, again, is so important. The other point is that the FTAs were very biased toward goods and not services, and they also excluded agriculture, if I'm not mistaken. Agriculture was added later in the case of Tunisia. But there is a need to revise the FTAs, for sure. And there is a need to do it with the involvement of civil society, because as you said, there is this misperception that trade liberalization will benefit the multinationals and not the SMEs in the countries. And it's not entirely wrong. So we need to make an effort to design the type of trade liberalization that will involve the small and medium-sized enterprises, the civil society, so that it will be done in a way that is participatory and not being imposed by others. Then there is the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement. Let's not forget, this is designed as one of the best free trade agreements ever, because it comes with institutional provisions for implementation, which the Barcelona Declaration or Agadir Agreement didn't have. And it also comes with some other provisions for environment, for labor markets, etc. Unfortunately, it was signed right before the pandemic, but there is hope. And I think to the extent that North African countries are part of it, that could really help with the South-South coordination, and then the triangular collaboration with the EU. And then the last point is on the liberalization of the private sector. It is true that in many of these countries, there is a predominance of the SOE. We were talking about it during lunch. The wage bill is so huge, and most of these civil servants are not in the ministries, they are in the SOEs. And this really crowds out the private sector. If you combine the laws that are obsolete for the business state or enterprises, yes, if you combine the predominance of state-owned enterprises with the laws and regulations that are not adapted to the needs of the private sector today, that is not a good climate for new business to emerge. Maybe I'll stop there because there is one more question, I believe.
Bonjour, merci de nous avoir donné l'occasion.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to participate. I would like to thank the organization for the choice of the civil actors in this event, and especially the Tunisian representatives, because we need to see real actors, productive actors that contribute with ideas to these events. So I hope to see you in other important events, as both in Tunisia or elsewhere. So thank you for your very interesting contributions. So I deal with the program Smart City International. It comes from the civil society. It started in 2009. We reformed in 2017. And now it has an integrated program that can allow us to change completely the economic model at the governance level of our territories. Tomorrow afternoon I will speak about it, but today I'll speak about the problems that we have raised here during the last conferences. We were speaking of the axis north-south Mediterranean. Considering that the Mediterranean is like a huge lake, but it is a real territory. And now we are waiting that the policy makers could do something. I had like 11 ministers for technology in the 6 last years, and it is the same for the Ministry of Equipment. So what we have done in this program Smart City is just to put in place a policy, a project policy. We are not waiting for policy to guide us. No, we do it. And we do that with the local collectivities. We have caravans with the national Smart City, 62 municipalities. 4 since 2017, and we have identified pipelines with a regional pack and also regional projects with an impact outside the Tunisian border. So I think this approach that comes for the basis is important also around this Mediterranean, this 5+5, to identify the big project structuring and this huge territory, which is our Mediterranean, and just to carry them on, because when there is a project, we have to schedule it, we have to finance them, and then we implement it. We make it work. So let's try to organize real projects with a real planning, with real actions. So the word Project Mediterranean appears from time to time recently, but there is a true project policy with specific projects. I have just heard somebody talking about the Silk Route Euro-Mediterranean. Well, you have to go to it. At our level, we start really to have port projects, digital projects, submarine projects for the Mediterranean. So there are plenty of specific projects that we start presenting. So I think that the debates 5+5 would be more on projects, and we stop debating politically, and also the mutual congratulations, and go to all the chain of implementing a project. Thank you. Do you have any answer? So not to linger more, there are certain things that we can do in the digital, and there are things that we cannot do. Private sector, yes, but when you have your goods, you cannot import-export because you have overcost due to the logistics, commerce, fair tariff, or the exchange rate, or the work code. It is difficult, and plenty of people give up. These are projects. It is projects, but.
Tunisie, par exemple, alors qu'au Maroc, ils en sont à Tanger 2.
in Tunisia, because in Morocco there are 2 ports, I think. But I think we really have to have the chance of really get out of that. The strategy of Tunisia recently is as to stop going downhill and to just take the things in their own hands. And so I think it will be a success after this democratic transition. I would like to thank IEMed and Casa Árabe, and also the quality of all the partners invited. Just one word I would like to say, not a project Mediterranean, but action Mediterranean, because we have spoken for more than 25 years. We had projects. It's true that we can have projects. So I think action Mediterranean, the Mediterranean of action. Project, yes, but specific action that is applied and that can really have an impact on the obstacles we find in import, export, and the barriers between the countries and South-South and North-South. I wouldn't have said it better. Is there any other question? Otherwise, we are going to close the session. You can go to the park. The Retiro is part of the World Heritage of UNESCO. It's a beautiful garden. It's just next door. So thank you. And thank you to all attendees.